Welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Bud Elliott. That's Tom Fornelli. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat. We've got an extra special Wednesday edition because, yes, like every single Wednesday, we are going to be hitting you with that big game breakdown, going inside the matchup, what we're looking at going into Texas, Oklahoma, going into Alabama, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Louisville, and maybe if you're watching live, a little bit more on that in a little bit. But because we have finished the full September of college football, that means we are going to be handing out our September Superlatives. For those of you who've been with us for a while, that you understand that that's why I'm wearing a tuxedo right now. You understand that we have some awards. That is Player of the Month. It is Coach of the Month. It is Team of the Month. It is the Game of the Month. And, of course, the Fornellis turn our spotlight on some unique situations, unique awards. You do. How many you got right now for the Fornellis?
6.
Nice. 6. I like to hear that.
Rapid fire though. So
before we hit the music and start the award show, real fast, we do have Wednesday night football. It's going to be Jacksonville State and Middle Tennessee, FIU and New Mexico State, midweek Cayusa, getting you rocking and rolling all through the month of October. So any leans or thoughts for anybody who's getting this before kickoff on Wednesday night? What's the Twitter tip, Tom?
I haven't figured that out yet.
Okay.
I was so busy preparing for the show this morning that I haven't really dug into tonight's games. Also, I forgot there were games tonight.
Oh, come on, man. I've been having this circle for a long time. As soon as they announced that Conference USA was going to be midweek, I had to get myself ready. I've been sleep training myself for the lack of sleep I'm going to get over, I think it's 49 straight days of football.
Mm-hmm.
Between there's either a college football or an NFL game every single day for the next 50 days. But you got any leans or thoughts on the slate tonight?
I think I'm the only person who likes middle, honestly. Like I'm just gonna wait and see if a 3 pops, and if it does, I'll take middle. I wouldn't lock up 3.5. Pretty good live betting game tonight if you guys are into that kind of thing, because they both play with good tempo and they both blitz a ton. So you're gonna have probably some explosive scores. This would be a good game for the old school longest score prop. If your book still offers that, I would play that over here. Pretty fun game to watch. Like there'll probably be a lot of sacks, turnovers, explosive plays. I dabbled a little bit this morning. I took some what did I take? Middle -11 plus 270, which was out there. That felt kind of off market. I priced that more at like 211. So took a little bit of that. If you guys have anything close to that,
mode. Let's go.
Yeah. But yeah, a fun live betting and derivative game.
Yeah, Cayusa alt line Wednesday night. Let's go. Market ain't got the right price on it.
Hey, you know what? It when you pay for that Suburban, they don't ask where. They just say give it a check. FIU New Mexico State. I am not betting FIU. I can't get to this number.
I can't get to who says that New Mexico State can be trusted to cover 6.5 points, given what we've seen from the team this year.
That's kind of my thought too.
I love Keon Jenkins, but he is very high up there with the whoopsie daisy rate, and that is one reason why maybe you should be considering New Mexico State in this one.
They're running like the pre-veer and shoot Heupel stuff from Missouri, which is kind of interesting. But I mean, New Mexico State's got some time to prep for it. People who I think are smarter than me in college football like New Mexico State here. So it's not like I'm not betting New Mexico State, but it's enough to keep me off FIU.
Over 48.5, maybe?
I don't know. If New Mexico State's in control of this game,
they're just going to sit on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
also,
go ahead.
FIU did a horrid job defending the option that Liberty runs 2 weeks ago. Do we think that they'll do a better job? Because New Mexico State runs kind of option type stuff.
Yeah. Well, listen, we appreciate it. We'll be dialed in again. Jacksonville State, Middle Tennessee, 8:00, and then FIU, New Mexico State. That game, you can see it on the CBS Sports Network. All right, let's go ahead and welcome everybody in. There's the bottles of champagne on the table. and we are ready to have our and welcome to the Cover 3 September Superlatives. We, of course, are handing out many awards here this evening: the Player of the Month, the Coach of the Month, the Team of the Month, the Game of the Month, and the Fornellis for the month of September. 5 weeks this year in the month of September. So let's begin our conversation with the Player of the Month. Bud, what's your nominee for Player of the Month?
I'm going to go with Jaden Daniels. LSU leads the country in EPA in non-blowout situations. I think he's been really pretty good. LSU's defense has given him almost no help. He's the only guy with 2 losses who has any shot at the Heisman at this point. And I think we should recognize a really good month by him.
He's he's doing a good job. He's one of the 5 to 10 best passers in almost all individual passing statistics in the entire country. That passing attack with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas is absolutely phenomenal. Offense did enough to win on Saturday. So it ain't Jaden Daniels' fault that they lost to Ole Miss. That's for sure.
He's just looked better throwing the ball than I thought he would. I was kind of a doubter of his. And I really never been all that impressed with how he throws it. And he's looked better this month than he ever has to me.
All right, Tom, what's your nominee?
Oh, I've got 4, but I don't know the neutral state EPA for any of these guys, but I figure they've got to be pretty good. And my primary nominee is the man driving the wagon, Michael Penix. I don't really think I need to go into too great of detail here. He's just throwing a whole lot of balls down the field, throwing for a lot of yards, throwing for a lot of touchdowns, and killing defenses.
Who else did you? All right, so I've got Caleb Williams.
He was on my list, yes.
Yeah, what has Caleb Williams done to change your perception of him other than the most outstanding player in college football? I mean, you got
Nothing.
What? Yeah, I can think off the top of my head of 1 or 2. Oh, Caleb, you shouldn't have done that, baby. But who doesn't have that through 5 games of the season, especially at the quarterback position? So I'm kind of in the position where Caleb has somehow been able to raise his own bar, and when the expectation was that high, it's been outstanding. I've got Caleb Williams as my Player of the Month.
But I think the you shouldn't do that is kind of baked into Caleb's game. I don't think Caleb can be Caleb without the you shouldn't do that, because you shouldn't do that, but he can do it. And I think that's what separates him from everybody else. He does stuff that you shouldn't be doing, and he does it effectively.
Do you know who else shouldn't do that? Is Pat Mahomes, and does it
exactly
right. I talked to Richard Johnson of Sports Illustrated yesterday. He called me, and we were talking. He's like, dude, do you think that Colorado, because a lot of people are saying Colorado mismanaged the end of game situation there, right? With how long they took on that final drive. I know Dion took a question about it yesterday, and he's like, do you think that maybe they were playing just for the onside kick so that Caleb would not get the ball back? Like they were trying to score, don't even want to have the decision of, do we kick it off and try to get a stop to get the ball back? Just score, take a lot longer time when they're down 14 and onside kick it so that he never gets the ball back. I was like, that sounds crazy to me and probably not optimal, but it's not totally out of realm possibility. And if so, that's a major credit to Caleb Williams and just how damn good he is.
Speaking of Colorado, I've got all of Danny's nominations here. Danny currently in transit right now to go be a part of some of the CBS Sports Network coverage of the midweek college football. I believe you can catch him on Thursday's college football desk. He's got Shadur Sanders as his Player of the Month. And I mean, Shadur, talk about somebody else that's just checked boxes and then even exceeded expectations. He loses Travis Hunter and still is able to go out there against not successful as much against Oregon as he was against USC, but still a strong performance for him right there. His honorable mention included Michael Penix, Tom's recommendation, Caleb Williams, my recommendation, Jonathan Brooks, with a note from Danny. All the focus on Quinn Ewers has taken the focus off Brooks, who is top 3 in the country in rushing. And then he's also got Cam Ward as somebody to keep an eye on. So we got to make some tough decisions here. Only one player can be the Cover 3 podcast player of the month for the month of September?
I want to give special shout outs to Audric Estime and Luther Burden, who are both on my candidates list. But my vote, I mean, it's Michael Penix. I think you're all very wrong if you don't think it's Michael Penix.
Are we gonna have I love this comment here. Ryan in the chat says Estime would win the Heisman in 1990.
He would, yes.
Yeah, he is doing all of being a Notre Dame running back and running as well as he has through this season so far. He is a prime 1990 Heisman Trophy winner.
And a one-loss Notre Dame right now, the last second loss to Ohio State in 1990 would probably still be ranked number 1.
Oh, yeah, that's right. when we were just deciding the national championship by the polls, that Notre Dame team still definitely got enough.
They showed a lot of fight in that loss. I'm going to put him at number 1.
All right, Bud, we gotta make some decisions. You came out here with Jane Daniels. I'm not hearing a lot of support for Jane Daniels.
Yeah, there's not a lot of support in the chat because his team lost 2 games. Shador's team also lost 2 games. You want to give it to Penix? Like, he's been basically perfect.
Well, okay, so it's Penix or Caleb, I think. And I think
Caleb's got a shot to win it next month, though, as well.
As the competition picks up. The fact
they've both been really, really good.
Yeah. So, Penix?
Penix.
I'm down with it, yeah.
Congratulations. Michael Penix, you are the Cover 3 podcast player of the month for the month of September. All right. Coach of the month. I mean.
Oh, easy.
Right.
For me. Do we all have the same one?
Do you believe?
Right?
Yeah,
easily.
I mean, does anybody have a nominee other than that? Oh, wait, hold on just a second. Let me open up this envelope.
Oh no, come on.
I have
Danny Cannell, Coach of the Month, top nominee, Jake Dickert.
That was the other. Yeah, I had 4. Dion, Mike Norvell, Jake Dickert, Steve Sarkisian.
Oh, Sark's a good one. I didn't have that on my board, but that's a smart one right there.
I had 4 that weren't Dion because I knew Dion was going to win. I got Sark, Venables, Brom, and Elko.
Do you think that if we coached Oklahoma, Oklahoma's record would be any different than it is right now?
No, but I think that after a very rough first season, they've come out and they've been doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing and just absolutely blowing the doors off people for the most part. I mean, they've struggled a couple times on the road, but they've won. They've had adversity. They've overcome it. And last year, this was a team that I feel like kind of made mistakes in those moments. And the coaching, I don't know, newness, I guess, inexperience being a head coach kind of showed at times. I don't think it's showing this year. I think that they're doing a much better job.
Elko probably also belongs on the list.
Yeah. Definitely for the list of consideration. What about Neil Brown? Listen, you don't not get credit for being able to take that team and being able to uniquely motivate them to get off to a 4-1 start, right?
Agreed.
Like I didn't know until maybe a couple weeks ago that their breakdown is that they break down on 14. Y'all heard this? As in the position they were picked in the Big 12 in the preseason poll.
I love that.
Like they were picked dead last, and he's used that. And like they break down on 14 because they were picked 14th out of 14 teams.
Chat has Kurt Signetti at JMU. Definitely good option. I mean, I think they're the only team in the country that's played back-to-back road games, and they ended up was it Utah State, Troy, UVA, and won them all. That's certainly a good one. I'm sure there's more. Oh, honestly, Whittingham, for how bad that quarterback situation is, for them to only have 1 loss right now is kind of impressive.
But the winner, I mean,
do you believe that?
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I mean, if you get up in First Take talking about you, like, and you know what I think of the roster. Like, I'm definitely voting for Dion in the first month.
Dion doesn't even play for the Cowboys or the Lakers, and they're talking about him on First Take. It's incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
So congratulations, a hearty congratulations to the Cover 3 podcast, Coach of the Month, Deion Sanders of Colorado.
We continue to hate Colorado.
Yeah, that's just a reminder. That is Deion Sanders, the Cover 3 podcast coach of the month. The Cover 3 podcast coach of the month, Deion Sanders of Colorado.
Mhm.
Coming up on the other side, we're not just talking players. We're not just talking coaches. What about the team? Who is the team of the month for September? And our favorite games, the Fornellis, and more. Next.
Over a decade of her reign concludes to an icon on and off the field. We thank you, Megan.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, we continue to roll on with our September superlatives with the team of the month. Tom, what's your nomination for team of the month?
Duh. You can't spell Washington without wagon. Washington, to me, through the first month of the season, when you take out the strength schedule and you just look at how a team is playing, no team has been more impressive to me than the Washington Huskies. I'd say Michigan, who is another candidate of mine, is a close second. And then I also, in my other nominee, Texas. I just think looking at this month, those were the three teams that had the big wins and have played the most impressive. And I'm sure you guys have some other nominees, but that's where I'm going.
This is one where I didn't have any of those on my list.
What?
I mean, like Texas has played like they played Bama, and Bama's look like a mess, and they beat them. They deserve credit, but like a bunch of nobodies. I went with teams that had like at least two good wins.
Okay.
Florida State and Washington State. Like to me, that's fairly impressive stuff so far. You know, Florida State goes into Death Valley, first team to beat them by more than a point in a decade. They also blew out LSU. So like LSU has 2 losses now. They don't have 2 blowout losses. Right.
You
And,
keep
like,
calling that a blowout loss, and that's fine, but they were trailing
it's
at half.
45-17, and they put a bunch of freshmen in there, and Daniels throws an 84-yarder with like 2 minutes left.
But they were trailing at halftime. I mean, it wasn't a
Sure.
wire-to-wire work them, you know?
No, but if you're up 28 on LSU and you yank the starters garbage time, like that's pretty blowout-y.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If they played 10 times, that was the outcome that is the most heavily slanted towards Florida State.
Yes.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Yeah, like obviously we wouldn't favor them. You know, I would not favor them by 28 over LSU. If they played the game again, I think you have to make FSU the favorite, though. I bet them. I thought they were a better team, but you know they were an underdog in the game.
All right, I've got Texas. What is it? What was the meme, Tom? The Simpsons meme?
It's a competition for third graders. Yeah, and Homer's beating their brains out.
Yeah, like I think that Texas has done everything, you know, that you have wanted from a team that's supposed to be a national championship contender. Like they have been really thorough in dispatching their first 2 conference opponents. And yeah, backup quarterback, sure, but how have they looked? Like they are getting out there and absolutely dominating teams. You throw in the Alabama win, which Alabama might be a mess from Alabama standards, but that is still a ridiculous game to go in and win on their turf against a defense that right now I think is one of the best in the entire country in the Crimson Tide. So Texas is my team. Obviously, Washington deserves some credit here. Colorado as well. How about Oregon? That's a team that has changed my I've got Oregon.
Who's Oregon played? Have they played any team in the top half of the country?
My concern with
Nobody's
Oregon was
played
that
anybody.
But there are teams that have played people like that and actually won hard games early in the season.
But I thought Oregon was going to look like USC, and Oregon doesn't look like USC because Oregon's the one team. And when we were power ranking the Pac-12 teams, they actually look like they have a defense with some structure that's not going to be totally leaky and picked apart. My expectation was that the Ducks would be a little bit closer to USC and maybe Washington. I don't know, maybe a little TBD on the Huskies defensive side of the ball. They look the most well-rounded in the Pac-12. I think that they have been, very impressive along those same lines of, all right, who have you played, but how have you looked along the way?
Also, they might have an NFL wide receiver for like the first time in a decade.
Yeah. Like You're talking about Franklin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, he has lived up to expectations as well. So yeah, like I've got Washington, I've got Florida State, we got Colorado, but I had Texas as my vote.
I hate Florida State, so anybody with Florida State's good with me.
Who does Danny have?
Texas.
Oh, it's 3 of us with Texas.
I mean, I guess my vote doesn't matter.
All right. Hey, it's just
You're
like
a
living
Republican in Illinois.
Yeah. So it's like living like a Republican in Illinois or a Democrat in Florida. There you go. And now congratulations to Steve Sarkeesian, Quinn Ewers, Jonathan Brooks, and the Texas Longhorns. You are the Cover 3 Podcast Team of the Month for the month of. What was that?
What was that?
All right, there you go. And now we turn to the game of the month. Got some pretty good ones here. Danny's got an off the wall honorable mention. It's not his winner, but Tom, why don't you take the lead? Or Bud, why don't you take the lead here? What's your game of the month?
My game of the month is from week 2. I'm going to go Kansas State at Missouri. Explosive plays, awesome defense at times, back and forth the entire day. Like you got to see really good playmakers, good quarterback play, dramatic ending with the thicker kicker hitting a 61-yarder after a penalty to end it. It's the most fun game I've watched the entire year. I think that's the game of the month.
It was on my list. It is one of 8 games I nominated. The one I have on top, though, Colorado 45, TCU 42. It's the game that kind of started the entire storm because the expectations for Colorado coming in, the preseason win total's 3.5. They come out, and TCU has proven to be that it's not the same team that reached the title game last year. But for Colorado to come out in that game, have that kind of performance, and get the win, considering what we all expected from it before the season began, I think was the biggest game of the month. And it was a fun, entertaining game in that it was high scoring and close.
That is also Danny's recommendation. And he also included in there, not only the Colorado coming out party, but that Travis Hunter's individual performance in that game, playing on both sides, the ridiculous awareness and closing speed on the interception in the end zone. You know, everything about that all along the way was definitely a reason to have it. Colorado TCU is also his nomination. The nomination I turned into Jordan is Kansas State, Missouri.
Uh-oh.
When you're 5'11", 243 pounds from Warsaw, Indiana, you got a lot of momentum when you rear that leg back and you swing it on forward. Did he get a little bit of a nice breeze right there in Columbia? Yeah, probably. 61 yards to win, as Bud mentioned, at the end of a very, very, well-played game between two teams that I still have a lot of respect for. As we go in and, break down all the games that have followed, I still look at these as two, very strong teams so far through this part of the season. So we got a 2-2 tie. All right, here's some other honorable mentions. I mentioned DK threw me off with this one. He threw Baylor UCF on there.
So did I. Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's give some love to the insane comeback. But, I think that overall it's going to be difficult to vote for that one over others. What else was on your list, Tom?
I had Texas 34, Alabama 24. Yeah. I thought just stakes and the upset of Alabama losing at home. I had another Colorado game. Colorado 43, Colorado State 35. Everybody in the world was up until 1 a.m. watching that one. Florida State 31, Clemson 24. That was a really fun, entertaining game. Ohio State 17, Notre Dame 14. Not the most electric as far as offense was concerned, but a close game that came down to the final moments. Notre Dame 21, Duke 14. Another similar game to the Ohio State Notre Dame game. And then there was the Baylor 36, UCF 35. Those were the 8 games that I considered, but I still think Colorado TCU is the number 1 game.
No, I'm nuking Notre Dame Duke. You cannot have Riley Leonard's whole October torched on one play and then say that was one of the games of the month. That was heartbreaking.
I mean, You know, it's only a high ankle sprain. He's not going to die. He'll be fine.
But did you die?
Yeah.
I do think there is an aspect here where it's like, was the ending great or like was the whole game great? The reason why I went with Kansas State, Missouri is like that thing was really, really well played from the jump. Like it was exciting plays the entire time. And there was some defense. Like if we're going to go shootout, Ole Miss LSU, right? I like Kansas State, Missouri was a good mix of like shooty, but like you did have some really good defensive plays too. I don't know. Like that's the best game I've watched so far this year.
I would say that the ending also is there for Ohio State, Notre Dame, where ending was amazing. I'm not sure the entire game I was in.
Oh, it was boring. We can say it. Like it was exciting, like in terms of like the drop, like it was competitive, but it wasn't really like an enjoyable watch necessarily. Like unless you guys like watching, 10 to 10.
Sometimes I do, but that's the thing is like there
Tom's
are
like, yes, sir.
well, like there are
West, give me
some
that.
13 to 10s that are different than the others, right?
That's fair.
And so I mentioned this to Jordan before we got started, but like that was a game where you came out of Ohio State, Notre Dame, and even though both teams are still top teams in the country, you kind of downgraded both of them.
Also, as ERO points out in the chat, there were a lot of fourth down stops in that Notre Dame Ohio State game. So it was teams that wasn't necessarily that the offenses stunk. It was that the defenses came through in key moments.
That's a good point. Very good point. All right, so we've got 2 for Colorado TCU, 2 for Kansas State, Missouri. Should we turn the tiebreaker over to Jordan or the chat?
I say the chat. I don't care what Jordan thinks.
Chat. Okay, so those are your options: Kansas State, Missouri, or Colorado TCU. Chat, be sure to let us know what you got. Danny also threw the Colorado State Colorado as an extra one. He also had Kansas State Missouri there. His notes were a really fun, clean game, and the winner by the thicker kicker. He said close to being my number 1. I'm seeing.
Listen, if K-State Mizzou wins, I won't be upset about it.
Wait, what you think?
I think it's. I mean, we're seeing so far.
I'm seeing a lot of Kansas State, Missouri.
Yeah.
We're going to call it.
See, Cover 3 likes Colorado. The chat hates Colorado.
Yeah, don't forget. That's always the chat there. So congratulations to the Alpha Nerd, Eli Drinkwitz, to Harrison Mavis, the thicker kicker. It is Missouri, Kansas State. It's your Cover 3 podcast game of the month for the month of September.
Still the best ad read we've ever done.
Yeah, and y'all actually got that one done beforehand, because I remember in like the very first like segment, it was like, and if the ad read we just did is any sign, we're off the rails, baby.
That was
game of the month, team of the month. Sorry, so to review our player of the month for the month of September. Congratulations to Washington quarterback Michael Penix. Our coach of the month for the month of September, that is Deion Sanders from Colorado. Our team of the month for the month of September is the Texas Longhorns. And the game of the month, Missouri over Kansas State. Congratulations once again to those award winners. And now it is time to turn it over to Tom Fornelli for the Fornellis.
All right, so we've got some big game breakdowns to get to, so I'm going to get through these as quickly as possible. We're going to start with the Whoopsie Daisy King of the Month award. Goes to none other than our beloved Anthony Calandria, who was just an electric factory all month long. Whether he was actually making plays, trying to make plays, or making terrible plays, it was never boring watching that kid play. Please put him back in as the starter. Virginia, give us something. Give us a reason to watch you. Nobody wants to watch Tony Muskett throw for 6 yards an attempt as you lose 17-14. The next one is the Thirsty Coach of the Month. Mel Tucker wins the Thirsty Coach of the Month award for, I think we all know why. And that leads to our next award, which is the BS Message Board Rumor of the Month, Urban Meyer to Michigan State. Yes, that's right, folks. The school with the Larry Nassar scandal and who just had to fire its coach for, once again, being Mel Tucker, is going to hire Urban 2 knuckles deep Meyer to replace him and run that athletic department. Really good. That's a great rumor. Keep floating it. Get the people listening to your radio shows and reading your columns. The crispiest secondary of the month award goes to LSU. You know, we have spent a lot of time on this show talking about how the SEC doesn't have any good quarterbacks. LSU is doing its damnedest to make the SEC quarterbacks look better by letting everybody throw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns against it. We appreciate your contributions, Tigers. Let's see what's next. Oh, the Player Hater of the Month award, Lou Holtz. I love it. I mean, it's keep going. It's really, really working. The fact that he is still going on shows and just trashing Ohio State. He moved him down in his Super 16 ballot, even though they didn't play. He moved him down like 5 or 6 spots. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. I love it. It's stupid fun, which is what this sport is supposed to be, even if Ryan Day doesn't think it's very fun. And then finally, the golfing Cover 3 co-host of the month award goes to me. I broke 90 yesterday, bitches.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Blacked
out on the back 9.
Blacked out on the back 9. I have no idea what happened.
Somebody from the chat tipped me to where Holtz hangs. And so I kind of want to see if we can get Lou on the show and just like let the chopper spray and just get all the takes.
Wait,
nonstop.
near you?
Yeah, he lives in Orlando. So
okay, so here's the deal. Just it may obviously journalistic practices, you got to let him know, but like don't even give him a chance to like move from his position, like sitting there at the Applebee's with his glass of white wine. Like just turn the phone up, you know, and let's just get him on camera and just going one after the other after the other. Maybe we'll just cut him up and do like a take a show, just make it a new regular bit.
Look, he's not camera shy. I mean, like he's on every single political network out there of a certain vein. And like I bet you he just let these takes rip. Like if we want to hit our vertical video goal for the month, just constant Lou Holtz takes is potentially the way to go.
These are all very, very good ideas. And Tom, that might have been the best edition of the Fornellis in the multiple years that we have been unveiling these awards
also
at the end.
Probably the most NSFW version that we've done. But I mean, I work with the material given to me by the college football world.
Just listen, we are just reflecting what we see in the college football world. Coming up on the other side, we do our big game breakdowns every single Wednesday, turning our attention to Alabama, Texas A&M, Texas, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Louisville, and for those watching live, maybe a little more next. On Saturday, it's another great SEC on CBS matchup when head coach Nick Saban takes his 12th ranked Crimson Tide into enemy territory against Texas A&M. We'll get you set for kickoff beginning at 2:30 Eastern with the Drive to Atlanta presented by Mercedes-Benz, followed by State Farm College Football Today. Saturday, the SEC on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus. Let's start right there since we did. How about Alabama, Texas A&M, the Crimson Tide, 2.5-point favorites. Texas A&M coming off a wild game. I mean, you know, sunrises, sunsets. Texas A&M and Arkansas play weird games in Jerry World, but this is a Texas A&M team that I think has been moving forward with some real momentum from the loss to Miami, the embarrassing loss to Miami, to be frank. Do we think that the Aggies – well, let's start from this. What aspect of this game, because we do want to sort of peel apart the matchup, what aspects of this game do you think matter the most? Where will it be won?
I think pass protection is going to be key, but also pass rate. So both of these teams have struggled this year to protect the passer. Alabama recently has found a pretty good way to remedy this, which is just don't pass. Right, they're like, oh, you know what? We're just going to run Jalen Milroe a bunch and throw some play action stuff against Ole Miss. And I believe they threw 12 passes against Mississippi State, and most of those were, you know, screens, some play action stuff. Basically, just said we're just not going to do any drop back passing. It's like a pitcher in baseball be like, all right, I really only have a good fastball on the team. Just throw it. We don't want to see that junk slider up there. We'll live with the results. A&M's pass rush has been fantastic. Can A&M force Alabama into a game state in which they have to pass? Right? Two-score lead, end of half situations. And if so, how does that look? Because Bama's run blocking the last 2 weeks has actually been fairly okay. I think part of that is because you get better angles when you're that dedicated to running the quarterback. But can Alabama pass protect if they have to? On the flip side, like A&M has really nice weapons, and they have not pass protected super well. Bama's defense looks awesome to me. The matchup of A&M's receivers on Bama's DBs is really pretty fascinating. How much will Bama have to blitz to get home? And if they don't have to blitz much, I think Bama has a pretty nice spot here. But on the flip side, like, can you really trust this Alabama offense on the road? We've seen some horrific performances from so far.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to with me looking at this one, because as you mentioned it, this Aggies defense is very disruptive. And the Alabama offensive line, which is something we've harped on for a long time, I think that having Milroe back there and just having him established and using him as more of a runner has really helped that offensive line in the run blocking aspect of it. But the pass blocking is still an absolute mess. And this Aggies team, it leads the nation in sack rate at 14.8%. And if you look at havoc rate, which for our listeners who aren't familiar is basically the percentage of plays that have a tackle for loss, forced fumble, interception, pass breakup, or a sack, they are leading the nation in that as well at 23.8% of their snaps. So nearly a quarter of their snaps on defense are ending in some kind of havoc play. That is not a great sign for me if I'm Alabama and I have Jalen Milroe standing back there in the pocket behind that offensive line on the road where things can be a little shaky, especially in a loud environment like that one. So the question for me is, does A&M want to bring that kind of pressure? Because they have a very high sack rate, despite the fact that they don't get a ton of pressure overall, which tells me either they're very, very good at disguising their blitzes and getting home, or the quarterbacks they've played have played a role in that sack rate. But I think you can get to Milroe if you bring the pressure. But on the other end, this is an Alabama offense that really struggles when it gets into the red zone. So do you want to maybe sit back, force Milroe to beat a zone and make those kind of decisions on the road, keep him in the pocket, and then take your chance in the red zone where he has really struggled to be effective as a quarterback? So that's going to be an interesting thing from the Texas A&M defense and DJ Dirk, and I'm really interested in seeing what kind of choice they make there.
It's an interesting point you bring up, Tom, because I think in this game, most of us would agree that low scoring favors Alabama, and that A&M would probably try to get out and run, not run the football, but like run a little higher tempo, try to play a little higher scoring game. However, A&M's defensive backs were horrendous against Miami, right? Like, when there were guys that they fell down, some people will tell you they slipped on the logo. I don't know about that. But there were wide open Miami guys pretty consistently. And Miami's receiving core has improved this year. I don't know if it's that improved. We'll see as they start to play some real opponents. And we just don't know about A&M secondary, because like Arkansas's receivers are pretty mid, and obviously their passing game is non-existent. They've played ULM, which runs like a modified Bryles type thing, but like it's ULM, and New Mexico, which is running what UAB ran for all those years under Bill Clark and Brian. So we don't really know how good the A&M secondary is. I expect that A&M will do exactly what you said. Sit back, because Bama can still hit an explosive or two.
Yeah.
Can they hit 3 or 4 passes underneath consistently? A&M's front is absolutely for real to me. I mean, you get Walter Nolan, Shamar Turner is freaking awesome. You got a lot of really, really good players in that A&M front. The back end, not so much. So I think you try to protect your back end with numbers, and you try to let your studs up front win and maybe force some field goals there in the red zone. But that does lead to a slower pace game, a lower scoring game potentially. So it's sort of a weird dichotomy. Like, do you want to try to get in the score fest, or do you want to try to – I think you probably still sit back. Durkin is also not known as a high blitz guy. So I can't imagine he'd break that tendency in this ball game, but he could. Who knows?
Jace McClellan, Roydell Williams, man, that's underwhelming from what we've seen from the Alabama ground game outside of what Jalen Milroe can go out there and do. You know, like workman-like from every now and then. I think they're both averaging around like 5 yards per carry, sure, but you know, it doesn't seem as though that is a dominant group. And I know that was an issue last year as well with Alabama. And so I'm really looking at that group to see whether or not they're going to be able to get anything, any kind of consistency going against a very good Texas A&M front. Also from the injury report side of things, mostly healthy, but I will say So Evan Stewart, little bit knocked up in the Arkansas game. I think it's an ankle. Jimbo says this week he should be good to go. I have full expectation that Evan Stewart is going to be out there. I'm not expecting he will be a late scratch.
Well, Chip, you're either really knocked or you're fully knocked up or you're not.
Oh, knocked out. I don't think he's gonna be like fully knocked out. But if he's
are we going nicked up or are we going knocked out?
nicked up or knocked out, knocked up, nicked out, nicked up. Listen, it's an ankle. I'm sure he's going to go ahead and give it a go. But could be something to keep an eye on if that thing gets aggravated. You took a little bit of a late hit and you had to go walk it off. But something to keep an eye on, as Stewart is, for my money, like one of the most important skill players that Texas A&M has on this offense right now. And when you've got a defense, especially a defensive front that can cause problems, man, Max Johnson would love to know that he's got Evan Stewart there to be able to throw a potential 50-50 ball up to, because of how much of a higher percentage chance he gives you of being able to make that be a reception.
You mentioned Alabama's running backs and the run game being kind of lackluster, and Bud touched on this a little bit too. Like, if you look at the raw numbers, Alabama's running backs don't look great. If you look at the raw numbers, Texas A&M's running backs, hey, Le'Veon Moss is averaging 6 yards a carry. Amari Daniels is averaging 5.5. But if you look at it from the EPA standpoint, Alabama ranks 77th in EPA per rush. A&M is 117th. Neither one of these teams has run the ball very well all year. It's going to be, will either of them be able to in this game? Also, turnovers. A&M's turned the ball over a lot. I mean, some of it was the Miami game and just kind of weird stuff, but they have turnover rate of 11.7%. The national average is 10.7. That ranks 77th. It's like, I know you're at home and but this is a huge game. You need to take care of the football in this one if you're going to beat Alabama.
Any other final expectations here?
Is there a number we feel like Bama has to get to? Because I'm almost certain that Petrino is going to scheme up like a shot or two, right? Like if Bama
Alabama needs 24. Alabama needs 24 points.
I was going to say 27.
Yeah, but
depending on tempo, yes,
Mm-hmm.
I could see that.
Like total is, and by the way, like speaking of turnovers, this might be hey, Alabama's defense, we need you to go out there and get us a score, or at least get us a short field kind of situation. Dallas Turner off the outside, strip sack, fall on the ball. Now all of a sudden life becomes much easier for Jalen Milroe when you're not asking him to march 75 yards. Over under is around 47. So we are looking at a game that should be decided in the 20s on Thursday. We'll see if anybody makes this one of their week 6 locks.
Speaking of that, I mean, Bama's what, 2.5 right now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume like full home field. Obviously, it would be like Bama 9.5, Bama 10 in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, probably around there.
Bama was just 6.5 against Ole Miss. Bama was what, 7.5 against Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on.
Something feel off there?
Can you run that back, please?
Sure. So
don't make Chip do math in his brain.
All right. So Bama's a 2.5 point favorite, right?
Yeah.
In college.
I understand the like comparative, like what. So
sure. Like, so for the chat, let's take them from College Station to a neutral site.
Right.
We'll give Bama back like 3.5 or 4. So that's going to take it up to 6.
Right.
Right. And then going in, it's big time game, full crowd, full environment. Going back to Tuscaloosa, we're going to go from that 6.5 number to 9.5, 10, adding in the home field, because you lose the home field when you go to the neutral, and then the other team gains the home field when they go to their home field. So when I say on the show, like flip home, right, you're generally adding somewhere between like 6 and 8 to the spread, unless it's a MAC game, and then I don't use any home field.
Yeah. All right. So disrespectful. Come on. You don't walk into the glass.
Well, unless you think bus travel is like maybe if we knew they're got like a whatever the really bad bus brand is now.
You seen Eastern Michigan? Come on now. All right. So you're saying that if Alabama like not blew out, but if Alabama beat Ole Miss handily, covering that spread, then how does that impact your expectation for the Texas A? Like, what feels off?
Well, it just, if you go just on ratings, basically A&M is being rated behind Ole Miss and behind Texas. At the same time, I think perception plays into this quite a bit. So we did not know how iffy Bama's offense would be when they were playing Texas. That's why they were slightly more than a touchdown. However, we got Bama really cheap against Ole Miss, right? Because we had just seen the USF game and it looked like a complete disaster. So obviously, if they played again today, Bama would not be 7 over Ole Miss. It would be 10, maybe a little more, depending, regardless of what Ole Miss LSU just did, whatever sport that was. But it is I do play that game in my head. I'm like, this team really like why is something off here? Is one of these teams significantly better or worse than maybe we thought of at the time? I don't know.
If I'm looking for any overreaction, it comes from it comes really more from the fact that Arkansas gifted Texas A&M a lot in that game, and credit Texas A&M's defense, the group that we started, praising at the beginning of this big game breakdown for creating that kind of havoc. But it was also a lot of short fields for that Texas A&M offense, a lot of good advantageous field position where 34-22, it was a kind of, I wonder if that game, makes Texas A&M look a little bit more dominant and maybe you're a little bit more confident in the Aggies coming out of it thanks to the way that the turnovers went in that game. We'll see. Always playing with public perception. Noon Eastern time. Get your deep fried treats. Say hello to Big Tex. And settle in for what should be an absolutely epic edition of the Red River Showdown. So, Red River Rivalry, Red River Showdown, Red River Shootout, whatever it's going to be called.
Shootout. Yeah.
Where's this one to say? Is it Oklahoma? Who you played versus how they played them. Toughest opponent that they will have on their regular season schedule. Easily. Most likely loss. How do you think the Sooners square up against a Texas team that we have seen tested more in this matchup?
I'm pretty excited to watch this. I've watched Texas so far. I'm pretty convinced that Texas has a good O-line and a really good defensive line, especially on the defensive interior. Obviously, we know Texas has elite weapons. We'll see if Jatavian Sanders plays, the tight end who's a total stud for Texas. I'm fairly certain that I know what Texas's floor is, right? I don't know 100% their ceiling yet. Are they the best team in the country? They have to be in the conversation. I don't know if they necessarily are the best team in the country, but they have really elite weapons, and I think are much better on defense than they've been in quite some time. They block Bama pretty effectively for a lot of that football game. So there is some signal that for me. On the Oklahoma side, they definitely play a style. They look great. Okay. Honestly, as far as just defensively, they look really, really good. But they do play a style where it's you have to be a certain level of team to handle it. And the level of team they've played so far really can't handle it. I mean, SMU's offense has been disappointing so far this year. They faced Tulsa's third stringer. We've seen Cincinnati's offense. Cincinnati was in the stretch of not scoring an offensive touchdown in 16 offensive possessions, right? Who else did they play? Arkansas State, where that was literally before they put the good quarterback in because they didn't know they had him because he was a true freshman. So Oklahoma has played an overwhelming style to me in this one. And I know I'm running long here. I watched a lot of clips last night. I don't know how well that style is going to hold up against Texas. It might. We don't know. I don't think we're stealing on the number here. I'm not sure this number should be 11 or something like that. I probably have a pick in this one for tomorrow, but we'll see. There have been some things that teams did to Oklahoma that make me think, if that team had a better quarterback, if they had a better receiver, if they could block it up for half a count longer, there are some opportunities to burn Oklahoma defensively on Oklahoma's defense. So to me, that is something that I think Texas is going to watch. I reminded of, remember the Texas-Kansas State game last year? Texas went unbalanced a lot, and they did a lot of this stuff with like trips into the boundary. And a lot of teams do struggle with this because it's a hard check to make because it makes it hard to fit the run out of it, but still cover it. I will look for Texas to attack Oklahoma's safeties in coverage down the field. because there are ways to scheme it up where you get those guys one-on-ones, and I do think Texas has a pretty good matchup there. I think if you're Brent for Oklahoma and you live by the blitz, you die by the blitz. Like, I would just come after Ewers nonstop, try to play a really up-tempo game. Maybe Ewers panics under the pressure. Maybe you get home a little bit, right? Like maybe he throws you a cookie or two and you take it back the other way. Like I would not. I know people are like, oh, Texas in the red zone, like it's been a problem. It has a little bit, but I would play really aggressively if I'm Oklahoma. It's what's got you here so far. I wouldn't play a bunch of soft stuff. Texas wise, do you remember Ohio State Clemson in the Sugar Bowl?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to take this game out of Ewers' hands in terms of like reading it up. I just want to go shot plays. Just give me a bunch of shot plays. I'm going to hit enough of them to get to a number that I feel good about, which is probably, give me 30 something. I don't want to give Quinn Ewers the chance to make a bunch of mistakes.
I look at this game and everything I see based on just the numbers and trying to break this down tells me to take Texas. But I've also seen this game like 1,000 times, and none of that ever really matters when these two teams play. So it's one of those weird situations. Quinn Ewers is definitely worse under pressure. I mean, every quarterback is worse under pressure than they are without it. But I think that there's a significant drop off in his performance when he is pressured. I don't have the numbers in front of me. This is just trying to remember what I saw. I think I'm correct here. I might be wrong. If I'm wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I understand that. I do think if you are Oklahoma, you want to bring pressure, but at the same time, again, this is going back to the same thing we talked about with Alabama and A&M. I wonder if you might want to just make him take those short shots, because we saw in the Alabama game, like they hit those deep throws. And you're right. Like the safeties that Oklahoma has could be a problem for them against these Texas receivers. It's something that the Longhorns can exploit. But what if he doesn't hit those deep shots? You know what I mean? Like, what can this offense do without those? Because if he wasn't hitting them against Alabama, and I know this is really duh, but if he wasn't hitting them against Alabama, Texas isn't winning that game. So I wonder if you try to take that away and see if it works. If it proves ineffective, okay, then maybe I start dialing up the heat and trying to, force him into a turnover and see if I can get home. But again, that offensive line is so freaking good that the Longhorns have that I don't know how confident I'm going to be. If I'm going to generate pressure, I'm going to have to bring extra rushers. I'm going to have to bring them from different spots. And maybe if they don't get home, that's going to leave my secondary, which is not the greatest, in a lot of bad spots covering dudes that are really hard to cover. So you could get burned pretty easily by it. But we talk about Texas's struggles in the red zone on offense. Where Texas doesn't struggle in the red zone is on defense. They have been one of the best red zone defenses in the country. And we talk about Brent Venables and like Oklahoma defense playing well, but there's a question about how they've played. I think we're kind of underselling how good this Texas defense has been. Like if you look at a lot of the metrics, I think the Longhorns are better defensively than the Sooners have been, and they've done it against a tougher schedule. I mean, they played Alabama, for Christ's sake. So like I said, everything about this game has me thinking, oh, this is going to be Texas big. No problem. They're going to be able to run the ball, throw the ball. Oklahoma will get points. I just don't know if they'll be able to keep up or get enough stops. But at the same time, I do think Oklahoma can exploit this Texas defense in a way that Alabama couldn't, because while Jalen Milroe will take shots down the field and he's capable of hitting them, he's just not very efficient. I think the Oklahoma offense is a bit more efficient in what it wants to do. And I think Dylan Gabriel could have more success as a passer in this one than Milroe did in that Alabama offense. And I think Texas needs to respect it more than they did against Alabama in that game. So this is going to be a really interesting showdown between these two quarterbacks. And also, I've seen a lot of jokes in the chat about it. What happens if Dylan Gabriel gets hurt? Like, everybody there's always a quarterback hurt in this game. Yeah. And then, then Jackson Arnold comes in and Texas's defense is probably in even more trouble than it was.
What if Quinn Ewers gets hurt?
Well, then Malik Murphy comes in and he's awesome too. Like, that's the thing. There are a lot of good quarterbacks in this game. Can we figure out a way to get them all on the field at the same time just to see what happens? Maybe throw some 2 QB offenses out there. But no, this is going to be a very fun game in which I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. I have an inkling, but I have no trust in that. And I really, really cannot wait to watch it on Saturday.
Let's empty the notebook. I think Tom brings up a great point on the Texas defense, right? Like they have been elite in the red zone. What do we think Dylan Gabriel struggles with? throws to the wide side of the field
Yeah.
because his arm's not big, right? Do you want to force him to make more difficult throws, which could result in explosive plays at the risk of not giving yourself the opportunity to win in the red zone, not giving yourself a chance to force field goals? I think probably so. Oklahoma's run game has been sneaky poor this year relative to competition. I mean, now I understand Cincy has a decent run defense, right? Ask Pitt, but SMU's is merely okay, and they didn't really run the football effectively in that game. It's an interesting question, man. Like, what do you want to do? This kid Jalen Catalon, who Texas got from Arkansas,
Yeah,
I know he hasn't played a lot of snaps this year. I assume he's been hurt, but like when I watch his cut-ups, man, he is all over the field. Like that's
he's violent too,
dude. Yeah, that could be a difference maker in this football game. Like assuming he's been playing more lately, so I'm wondering if he was hurt early in the year. I just didn't have it in my notes, but that's like a major piece for them if he's healthy. That's a difference maker for those guys.
It is funny, Tom. You mentioned, the Texas defense, the Oklahoma defense. They are both really strong, right? And we look at the quarterbacks that they faced, and you need to make some adjustments for that. But I still think it's going to be a shootout.
Yeah, because it's this game
in tempo, right?
Yeah.
Like Texas wants to go a little tempo. Obviously, Oklahoma wants to go crazy tempo.
Whether you are looking at success rate, whether you are looking at any of the EPA statistics, like these two defenses grade very, very well, and you can't talk me into an under. Not in this game. Absolutely not. Bud, can you talk yourself into an under?
It's big game Sark. If you kind of believe in that concept, like he really gets in his bag and scheme stuff for these. I don't know. Like, could I bet under? I'll always bet numbers, not teams. I don't know if I will bet under, but like I could.
That's the words of I've heard a lot of professionals and smart, savvy bettors say that. No, always bet teams and vibes. That's never bet numbers.
If this game goes under, it's Texas gets up early. Texas snuffs out these Oklahoma skill guys who may or may not be good.
Right.
And then like Texas reduces the tempo because they're up. You get a whole lot of Jonathan Brooks, whole lot of short passes, easy conversions. Texas run kind of like that drive Texas had against Alabama, right? Like one of the most impressive drives of the year was that drive to salt the game away. That's kind of how this goes under. If Oklahoma gets up early, it's
over.
It's no doubt over.
42-14 is an under to your Texas, get up and sit on it type situation. Over under of 60, Texas favored by 6.5. All right. Let's do one more, turning our attention to Notre Dame and Louisville. Notre Dame in the midst of 4 straight prime time games, second one in a row on the road. So what are we expecting as they take on a Cardinals team that finds itself up in the top 25, 5-0 under Jeff Brom? Everything that, if you painted the why Louisville will go over, we looked at the schedule and we said, look, they're going to be showing up to that Notre Dame game 4-1, maybe even 5-0. That is exactly where they are. What are we looking at in this matchup?
Coaching.
Ooh. How so?
I think Notre Dame has better players at almost every position except for wide receiver. It is just a tough spot for the Irish, right? Like, I think Louisville has a better head coach than Marcus Freeman. Obviously, Jeff Brom is a really, really accomplished coach. And that's not a knock on Freeman. I think Brom's like a top 15 coach in the sport.
Jeff Brom's got 9 years in his 9 or
exactly
10 years of being a head coach under his belt, and good success at Western Kentucky, led Purdue to a Big Ten title game.
Can you get your team ready to play a third anticipated, competitive game in as many weeks? Ohio State, at Duke, at Louisville. Louisville's got an extra day of rest because they played on Friday night. Jeff Brom will have some stuff schemed up. It's going to be on Marcus Freeman to get these guys to come out and be like, hey, play to your talent level again. If you do, you should push these guys around on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I think Louisville has one receiver who really scares you. The quarterback's fine. He's not amazing.
Would that be Thrash? Jamari
Yeah,
Thrash?
I think Thrash is really good.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. But like to me, it's a coaching matchup because the players here I think are decisively better for Notre Dame.
Interesting.
I know they're undefeated. I don't buy Louisville.
Yeah.
It's when I watch this team, it's like, okay, I think it speaks to kind of what you're saying about Braum is that he is getting the absolute maximum out of this team, because I think part of what my problem with this offense is I don't buy Jack Plummer as anything more than a jag, but we have seen Jeff Braum get a lot out of Jags with his offensive play call.
Yeah.
Jag Plummer. But yeah, like,
Sorry, it's too easy. Okay.
Yeah.
but like, here's the thing. Plummer threw 5 touchdowns against Boston College. Take that game out of the season, and he's got 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. He has not been spectacular. He does make too many mistakes. He puts the ball in danger a lot. And I think going up against this Notre Dame team, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody that Louisville has played, but we talked all off season about Louisville as a dark horse because of its schedule. Louisville's played Georgia Tech, Murray State, Indiana, Boston College, and NC State team. An NC State team that on the road, that's a very good win and they should be proud of it, but it's also an NC State team that I think is performing below our expectations for it this season.
Yeah.
And this is a Notre Dame team that I think is far better than anything they have faced on both sides of the ball, on both lines of scrimmage. And I think the one thing on the other side of the ball with Louisville, they get a ton of pressure. Like, they are very, very good at that. They've been kind of good at that for the last few years, even with the coaching, turnover on the staff. But they also haven't faced an offensive line that's anywhere near as good as this one. And they also, despite that pressure, very seldom get home. So I don't know if that's going to be there for them. And I think Notre Dame, like Sam Hartman, has seen a lot of pressure in the last few weeks against Duke and Ohio State, and he's handled it pretty damn well for the most part. I just don't think that the advantage that gave them in those games that they've won is going to carry the same kind of benefit to them in this matchup against Notre Dame. I think the Irish getting their receivers back is going to help that offense. I think it's going to give them a lot more options and make it much more difficult to slow down if I'm Louisville. I think they can lean on you with the run game. I think they could keep that Louisville offense off the field, which is the one thing you probably want to do, because I don't want to give Jeff Braum chances to put up points against me, because he'll do a good job of it. He's very good at it. So I look at this matchup, and it's like you said, but everywhere I look on the field, I feel like Notre Dame is better than Louisville. And I would say Jeff Braum, I think with the experience and everything he's done, is definitely a better head coach to this point as far as game day than Marcus Freeman has been. But is he that much better where I can really think Louisville's going to go and beat the Irish in this game? I don't think so. I think Notre Dame's been tested. I think they've passed a lot of these tests. And I think it's at home, so I can't completely rule Louisville out. But just based on what I see, like Chip, the teams and numbers thing, your teams and your vibes, my vibe from Louisville tells me that this one could get ugly fast. And that's just kind of what I'm expecting.
All right, to argue the for Louisville point beyond the coaching, totally agree with Tom that Louisville's offense has been very dependent on opponent quality. Like, they have blown out all the bad defenses they've faced. Depending on how good you think Indiana's defense is, you can kind of put that in a weird category, or you can mark them.
Well, it's Indiana and NC State. Like, the outliers are when,
right.
Granted, like, not road game for Indiana, but not in what I do think is going to be an incredible atmosphere. Like, night game, you're in the top 25, the Jeff Braum arrival, everybody who has been opening up their checkbooks and their hearts is looking at this as like, okay, here we go. And they are going to be primed. So what can happen? Sorry, bud, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I think that's exactly the point. Like home field in college is real, right? Playing back-to-back tough games is a real thing. If you look at it, NC State kind of held both these offenses to similar success rates. Not identical, similar. Notre Dame found a way to hit some explosive plays against NC State, while Louisville largely did not. If Notre Dame can't get out and score, that's how this game stays close. Like, Notre Dame needs to go score 30 plus in this one, right? Louisville does not present as a good defense so far. But if you want to know how it stays close, it's that. Now, they're supposed to get Thomas and Greathouse back this week from the press stuff that I read and watched. Obviously, Irish Illustrated does an awesome job. We hope those guys are back, because Clearly, they're better than what the backups are. But if Notre Dame just can't score, if they're just if they're an NFL team scoring wise, in the teens, 20s, like they've been the last couple weeks, it's hard to blow a team out if you only score 20 something. And that's how Louisville hangs around. And I do have confidence Louisville will scheme up, one or two things. Just one or two things should not be enough.
Mm-hmm.
But if it is, that's where you got problems. If this Irish offense just continues to not score, I have max confidence in Notre Dame's defense. I think they're really good.
Yeah. Will be very interesting to watch. Again, that is a 7:30 p.m. kickoff. Notre Dame currently favored by 6.5, over under of 54.5. All right, we're going to do something a little bit special here for all of y'all watching live. If you're listening to the audio product, well, I'm sorry, the podcast is about to end. If you are here on YouTube, we've got more big game breakdowns coming. So we will be back on Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time for the best part of any week in the college football season. It will be our locks for week 6. And you can follow him on Twitter at BudElliott3. You can follow him at Tom Fornelli. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're back with the Cover 3 Overtime here on the Cover 3 podcast. All right, let's keep
bonus big game breakdown.
Yeah, that's the thing is we want to continue to reward those of you who watch us on YouTube, those of you who subscribe, who cut the notifications on. We've given you bonus mailbags, we've given you bonus hangouts, and we are going to continue to do that here with a little bonus big game breakdown. Let's also stay in that night slate with Georgia and Kentucky. I was on the radio this morning in Mississippi, and they just said, can Kentucky keep it close? I will share my response later. Bud, do you think Kentucky can keep it close?
Sure. Yeah, Georgia's offensive line does not look particularly good so far this year. They've had to cut down how much stuff they run in terms of how much variant as far as schemes they run, and they also just haven't blocked what they have run very well. If Kentucky's pass defense is generally considered to be a bigger weakness than its run defense. Entering the year, Kentucky had some questions about its corners, and it's that is something you could exploit if you're Georgia. But if you can't run the football, we will see. We'll see how well they do. I think they could keep it close. What scares me here a little bit is Auburn really could not throw the ball on them at all, and they really couldn't get them with the conventional run game. They had to go really unconventional run game. Peyton Thorne was a shockingly good runner. And how much non-conventional run game can Kentucky have? Now, maybe Kentucky's regular run game is just well and good. Maybe Ray Davis and those guys are really that good.
Like the baseball player that hits 195 but has 42 home runs and 75 RBIs. That's Kentucky. Kentucky ranks 4th nationally in explosive play rate on offense, which is really good because big plays are fun. But as far as success rate, which is down to down, they rank 70th. This is very much a boom or bust offense. So can Kentucky hang with Georgia? Yeah, if there's plenty of boom, if they hit those big plays to kind of keep up with the pace. But if Georgia takes that away, this is going to be ugly. I just don't think if you ask Kentucky to put together a 7, 8, 9, 10 play drive against this team, they're going to have any real shot, even with the admission that this Georgia defense is not the same defense we have seen in recent seasons. I just haven't seen enough from Kentucky to have the confidence in them to do that. And plus another stat here, I do whoopsie daisy rate for quarterbacks solo. I also keep track of it for teams, and Kentucky ranks, 89th. They've got a 4.2% whoopsie daisy rate. That's fumbles and interceptions. That is not good. You can't be making those kind of mistakes against Georgia and think you're going to hang around.
Yeah. So the problem is 219 yards on the ground given up to Auburn does kind of skew things, right? Because I was looking at this Georgia defense, and my hypothesis when I was digging in is that it is actually a group that is stronger on the back end, right? And that they've been, their safeties are awesome. Their linebackers are awesome. That's what I like from a personnel perspective. So what does the production look like along the way? But I mean, less than 100 yards allowed against UAB, less than 100 yards allowed against South Carolina, less than 100 yards against Ball State, 132 at 4.4 a pop against UT Martin. That was kind of a strange game altogether. So I guess that's my question here is, when we know that Kentucky is coming off this ridiculous rushing performance, and Bud, you make a really good point about traditional ground game versus non-traditional ground game, but how does Kentucky keep this close? Is that we continue to find out that maybe this Georgia defense is stronger on the back end against the pass than it is against the run. If the Wildcats have any kind of success there, that is an important note for us as we continue to move forward and start to consider what the recipe is to try to beat this Georgia team. I also like this from Isaac in the chat. Georgia being used as a bonus breakdown will be used as motivation by Kirby Smart.
One other note for this game that I have, I feel like if you're Georgia, this is a game where you want to kind of lean on Carson Beck. Like, admit that your run game isn't all that great right now. Like, you can't abandon it because you need it to stay balanced and but Kentucky's really good against the run. It's not as good against the pass. I think at some point Georgia has to understand what it's dealing with, what the situation is, what its personnel dictates, and just lean into it. I know it kind of goes against everything you believe, but just Carson Beck is not bad. You have Bowers, you have other weapons. Use them early. Don't wait until the second half when you kind of have to.
What are the odds that Kentucky's offense is fixed? Because for the first, 4 games, offensive line looked poor, like they had bad communication. Right tackle was not playing well. They had some surprising guard and center problems. I know Horsey was out as one of their guards for a little bit, but he was back. What are the receivers were getting called out by the offensive coordinator?
Mm-hmm.
Quarterbacks missing throws, doesn't look in rhythm. Are we totally sold that Kentucky's offense is fixed because of like 2 75+ yard runs?
No.
I tend to believe more of what I saw in the first 4 weeks. Like, Kentucky deserves credit for that win over the Gators, but I would need to see it more before I back Kentucky here.
Isn't that also really tough to ask them to, like, because you mentioned having a Florida week, like Kentucky had been working on that.
That was their Super Bowl.
Yeah. Are they going to be able to reload the musket and get right back up against a Georgia team and have that happen in Athens?
Do you try to make Devin Leary beat you? Are you confident Devin Leary can beat them?
No.
I mean, is it possible that Kentucky has the athletes to, in theory, win one-on-one outside against Georgia? I know that sounds crazy, but Kentucky's receivers are that guy athletically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, route running, actually catching the football, understanding concepts, maybe not. And that's kind of what the OC Cohen had kind of called him out for, because he was asked, hey, how do we get these receivers more involved? He's like, they need to get themselves more involved by running the correct route and, doing the right adjustments and catching the football, things like that. It's an interesting question. Do you think Kentucky can run on them a bunch?
Yeah, that's what I'm like. I think maybe. I mean, if they avoid third and long situations, have good early down success, and they can maintain some kind of balance. I mean, we are talking about, and yes, as always, competition, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, Ball State, yada, yada. But we are still talking about 10 touchdowns to 5 interceptions for Devin Leary so far this year. He's not been great, but he's been effective and made teams pay.
Also, I try not to take any one game too heavily when considering teams and understanding that some days things just happen and they don't work. But man, last week against an Auburn team that cannot pass and was playing without a passing game, Tigers were still able to run the ball pretty effectively. I mean, I know Peyton Thorne did a lot of it, but he's not really a scrambler. But the fact that Auburn was able to move the ball on the ground pretty effectively last week against this Georgia defense is what just kind of sounds the alarm bells for me, which is why I think, I don't think Davis is going to have the same kind of game he had against Florida, but I do think they're going to be able to get some plays on the ground. Yes.
He is no doubt Kentucky's best chance to be able to go into Athens and get that win. Pac-12, little afternoon game, little 12 o'clock local time, Washington State, UCLA. This one is going to be in the Rose Bowl. Bruins slight favorites here by 3.5. Feels like kind of a tough spot for Washington State. And here's why I say that. Washington State has a quarterback in Cam Ward who's among the best in the country, an offense that's been absolutely able to cook with Ward at the helm. But they might be running into UCLA coming out of an off week that is ready to really unveil what Dante Moore can do. I think Washington State can probably be had on the ground. This could be a big Carson Steele game. This could be a big Moore makes him pay with his legs game. I just have a sense and a sneaking suspicion that Washington State's defense is really going to be challenged, and that if the Cougs want to maintain their status as a top 15 team in the country in the AP top 25 poll, then they're going to have to get a great performance out of that side of the ball in what is a little bit of an under the radar, maybe sort of sleepy spot on the road against UCLA coming out of an off week.
Yeah, I've long thought that Washington State was going to be an over team this year, just with the style of play. I think they made a major upgrade at offensive coordinator. Cam Ward looks like the guy we thought they were getting coming out of the FCS. And Washington State lost a lot of really, really good defensive players to the NFL and to the portal. And you'd like to think Chip Kelly coming out of a bye week can take advantage of that. But man, that UCLA offensive line looked poor against Utah. I mean, Utah whipped them physically at times, but they also just miscommunicated a lot of stuff. And it's a hard game for me to predict because I don't know how fixed it'll be coming out of the bye week. I mean, you had 3 cupcake opponents rather to get right before you went and played Utah. And then they go and play at Utah and they totally crumbled. I mean, look, so did the Gators, right? Their offensive line had like 1 million short yardage penalties and miscommunicated a lot of stuff. Weird things happen in Rice Eccles at Utah. You're playing back in the Rose Bowl. I could see them putting up a big number on Washington State if they get that stuff fixed, because athletically, I do think they have the guys there, and Moore can make the throws. On the other side, I think it's fairly accepted that UCLA's corners are probably the real, kind of tenuous spot on their defense, whereas the front seven is very good.
And good, but that's like a UCLA front seven that has improved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're not looking at UCLA's defense like an absolute, league faucet right now.
Right. They got multiple NFL guys on that defensive front. Like there's a lot of SEC teams that would take that UCLA defensive front over theirs, in my opinion. Can the back end be good enough? If Washington State can block it up, Cam Ward can carve this secondary. I just don't know if they can.
Yeah, I look at Washington State and, we give them a lot of credit, I think, because, they are not considered one of the Pac-12 favorites. So I think it tends to cause us to overlook the fact that while we will roast USC's defense, we will roast Washington's defense, we will roast Colorado's defense, and we'll give Oregon's defense credit just for not being terrible. Like Washington State's defense isn't terrible, but it hasn't been that good either. Like it's just kind of mid-ish. And I think that going on the road, UCLA struggled at Utah. Dante Moore threw the pick six, first snap of the game. Things quickly snowballed from there. I don't think we're going to see the same thing at home against this Washington State defense that, it's allowing 21 points to freaking Northern Colorado. It has not held anybody to below 20 points in a single game this season. It can't get off the field in the red zone. It's giving up a touchdown damn near every time an offense reaches there. And it doesn't get pressure on the quarterback. It doesn't get sacks. It doesn't do the kind of things that you have to do to play on the road to win games. So I do think that this matchup, like the UCLA offense we saw against Utah, I expect to be much better, much more explosive, much more cohesive than what we saw in Rice Eccles. And I think, you talk about like the miscommunication on the offensive line from UCLA. Quarterback plays a role in that. And a quarterback playing in his first road start in that environment might not have been communicating to the offensive line what he was seeing that they needed to know, which then causes the offensive line to look like idiots. So I think that is something you have to consider in this matchup. And I like Wazoo. I love Cam Ward. I think he's going to have a big game. But like Chip, you're mentioning, this UCLA defense is good. It is one of the few Pac-12 defenses I look at and say, all right, there's something here. We tend to not see it a lot in this conference. So I think they're in a similar position to what UCLA was at last 2 weeks ago, going on the road to Utah. That's kind of how I look at Wazoo. I think Cam Ward has been fantastic this year, but I do think if there's going to be a game where Cam Ward finally kind of bumps into some trouble and struggles, this is the first chance for that to happen. I wouldn't be shocked if it does. I like the Bruins here. I think that this is just a better matchup for them at home.
Lincoln Victor, receiver for Washington State, I think is out for this. He's
like
their number 2.
There's number 1.
Do we like him better than Kelly? I don't know. I don't have a great feel for like if he's.
I would just say leading.
He's one of their top players.
Yeah. Off the top of my head, I believe he is the leading receiver. I haven't fact checked that, but I slipped up earlier. I mean, if you're listening to audio, I'm going to catch that heat. The Texas A&M Arkansas turnover battle was 3-1 the other way. I just had it completely mixed up.
You idiot.
But I understood what you were saying, though, because you were saying how sloppy Texas A&M was, and they were.
Yeah. Anyway.
No, you're an idiot.
I'm an idiot. God. And listen, and Texas A&M has enough online fans that I'm going to hear it. So
Texas A&M, really? They're online?
How many hours of broadcasting do you do a week? Like you're probably not going to bat 1,000.
Yeah. Listen, my hours on camera and off camera is like a decent split. All right. What about LSU Missouri? All right. So do we still think that Missouri's cornerbacks and pass defense are as strong as we were thinking they could be coming into the season? This will be their best. This will be their toughest test.
What do you think about Kansas State's passing game? Like, how good do you think it is?
Their talent at wide receiver is nowhere close to LSU's. Their quarterbacking is not close to LSU's.
I mean, if there's a game out there that's like buy the dip, sell
it's
the
LSU
high,
to come back.
This one,
yeah.
That's
how many yards is Luther Burden going to have in this game?
That's the other thing is that because do you know what oh man, I'm so sorry. I cannot give credit for this, but one of the storylines that was being pulled during all the availability this week is that if you really look at the numbers, this LSU offense is running right in line with 2019 LSU, which in a vacuum, yeah, sure. That's great. So my challenge would be, is this LSU defense going to have the wake up moment that LSU defense did after they gave up a whole bunch of points, I believe, to Vanderbilt? It was either the Vanderbilt or the Ole Miss game went totally sideways. Then they got a bunch of things corrected and got enough defense down the line. Is this a spot going up against, Brady Cook and Luther Burden and this Missouri team? Is this a spot where they can get off the mat and actually, show some inspiration? Because they've got 2 losses overall, and we dogged them on Monday. But they've only got 1 conference loss. And with Alabama still on deck, LSU can still get it to the SEC championship, but they're not going to be able to do it unless they fix that defense.
I think if you're LSU, knowing how poor your secondary has played, maybe this ends up biting you in the ass. But again, considering how things have gone before, I don't know that that's really any different than what you've had. But I would probably be selling out on Burden. I don't think I would have so much of my defensive scheme to slowing him down and stopping him and be like, all right, Brady Cook, let's find out if you're actually that good. Go to your other guys. See what happens. Can you guys continue to move the ball down the field that same way? Will that be effective? Will that be their plan? I don't know, but that's what I'm trying to do in this one, because Burden really has been, to a large degree, the offense for the Tigers. He is just the release valve. Throw the ball out there, get it to him, and let him go do crazy stuff. And it has been very effective. So I do not blame them for continuing to do it. But if I'm LSU, that's what I'm trying to take away. Because if they do, the LSU offense is really good. And I have respect for this Missouri defense, but I don't know how many defenses are out there that I can actually stop the LSU offense when it executes. So like you're saying, but the buyback kind of thing, that's kind of where I'm leaning on this one too.
It's easier said than done, though, because if you look at the history of Eli Drinkwitz's offenses, he does a great job of taking his best player and putting him in the slot. We talked about this in the offseason when we talked a little college fantasy football. Who played the slot last year for them?
Love it.
Who led the SEC in receiving last year?
Love it.
Yeah, and Burden's a better player. They put the guy in a slot to give him a clean release. It's hard to press him. They move him around. They get him on a safety. I don't know if LSU has somebody that they feel comfortable traveling with him, right? So, but obviously, if it's hard to play some of that bracket stuff on the slot, and it can mess with the rest of your defense. I will say LSU got the best game they've got all year out of Perkins against Ole Miss. They just got a really crappy game by everybody else. Perkins is now playing more of that just go get it role. What's the downside to just like having the front drop all the two gap stuff and just, hey man, like just get after it, cause chaos. You know, we'll play a 14 possession game because you'll get a couple sacks. We'll get off the field a little bit. We'll give up a couple 50-yard bombs. Like you're already doing the other side. You just didn't get the havoc quite as much against Ole Miss. So I wonder if LSU doesn't just turn it loose and be like, all right, whatever, burn us. We'll burn you back. I think both sides might actually do that because I don't think Ole Miss, I don't think Missouri can hold up in coverage very well against these guys. So this could be a really, really fun game to watch if that's how they both play it.
Over under of 64.5. Line too little?
Over.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's where I'm leaning. Will I lock it up? We'll find out.
We'll find out on Thursday. Any other any other notes or a matchup you want to get some attention to?
In that one? I
will
say, like Missouri, if you go full out burden, Theo Weiss has been a pretty nice number 2 for them.
Mm-hmm.
Former Oklahoma
wide
receiver, yeah.
They got some guys who can play pretty well.
Mookie Cooper.
Cook takes care of the ball so far, really. I mean, he just set the SEC record for consecutive passes without a pick. So, Drinkwitz and those guys scheme it up really well, and he doesn't take a lot of chances. You know, can you move him off his spot? We'll see. That's going to be an interesting one.
Do you guys go into a different game here? We talked about it a little bit. Maryland at Ohio State. How much faith do you have in Talia and the Terps and that offense to be able to move the ball against this Ohio State defense?
None. I like Ohio State's defense better than I like its offense.
Straight into the point.
And I'm the sucker who said that they get off the bus and score 40. And I don't even think they need to do that because of where that defense is at right now. They are absolutely ferocious. I think it's going to be a lot of problems for Talia, who can limit turnovers, but has a whoopsie daisy monster growing inside of him, ready to emerge at any moment.
So if I set Talia's interception prop at 1.5, where are you going?
Over.
Wow.
No, hold on. Turnovers.
Wait,
Can I get
1.5?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to go over 1.5 total turnovers.
Okay.
So it's still a lot. I mean, you could get sacks and you know, just incompletes. I think it's a good number. Not a lot, but I will say that Maryland has been better than I thought they would be.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Indiana could give them some problems and was way wrong about that, obviously. This offense is better than I thought it was. Like maybe they need to stop doubting. I don't know. But Ohio State's defense does look like it's for real. This is the best passing game they've seen, though, right?
Yeah.
Clearly.
Mm-hmm. Definitely the quarterback with the most screw it, I'm just going to throw this anyway kind of energy that they've faced to this point.
Like, I think I would take Hartman over Talia.
Yeah.
But receiver-wise, like, it's clearly,
I was going to say, like, total
Maryland.
passing game.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's a situation like I'm getting at. Like, if you're defending a player like Hartman and you're trying to take away the big plays and trying to force him into taking the smart throws, Hartman's going to take the smart throws.
Yeah.
Talia might try to force some things that he's capable of making, and which is why he kind of forces them. So you might get, even if you're trying to take it away, like he might just be like, oh. It's like when you're playing poker and you're trying to bluff somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Talia's got some of that energy going.
Yeah.
It speaks to me. Talia and I are poker brothers.
Was this game like a total shootout last year?
I don't know if it was a shootout, but I mean, it was
it was
up there.
I'm a chaos agent at the poker table. I make people furious for my irrational raises and calls.
I really like this 36. I'm gonna raise.
Let's go. Yeah, very, very curious to see there. But my position on Ohio State and the reason why I still have them number one on my CBS Sports 133 ballot is because of what the defense has shown and what I believe the high end potential is of the offense, which we've only seen really against lowly Western Kentucky, at least in terms of them really being able to like let it fly. But I'm still a believer that because of what Jim Knowles has done here in year 2 with that group, and they make life really, really hard on anybody who lines up against them.
Yeah, last year's game was 43-30, by the way. So yeah. Talia, let's see what his numbers were. He threw for 293, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions.
This was insane late. It was, I think it was like a dead under-ish game early on, and then the fourth quarter just exploded. I remember just going nuts, and I think Ohio State scored. They have a defensive score to cover this late, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the only time they did that, by the way. Remember against Penn State?
Yep.
Oh, actually, Northwestern too is like
Mhm.
a famous bad beat where they had a defensive score. I don't know, maybe a decade ago.
So
the
who
one
else
thing
had
we have-
Maryland winning this game?
All right, last thing on this. How good is Maryland's defense?
Hard to say.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, like I mean,
This is why I'm a little scared to bet under here.
Yeah, you have to. Again, it's one of those things that we've mentioned. You know how you play versus who, but you do have to factor in who they've played as far as defensively, and the fact that in this matchup they have not seen a whole lot of Marvin Harrisons or Mecca Bukas to this point, and they're going to be seeing them on Saturday. It's just, yeah, I feel like I've been burnt by, or not even. I feel like burnt. Burnt's the wrong word because it's not like I put too much trust in it. It's just I've seen Maryland in this spot too many times in recent years just kind of blow up, and it's hard for me to really trust them in this spot.
It's like not taking, put it in a vacuum. Maryland's numbers against the pass, like, all right, they have really tightened things up against Indiana, Michigan State, Virginia, Charlotte, and Towson.
Is there a single player Maryland has faced in an opposing offense so far this year from Indiana, Michigan State, Charlotte, Virginia, and an FCS school, I think?
Hey, Towson.
Okay, Towson.
That's Mike Loxley's Towson Tigers right there.
Any of those guys start for Ohio State's offense. Like maybe there's a tackle that I'm not thinking of.
There's a tackle somewhere.
Maybe a Michigan State tackle, maybe.
Skill position, I mean, if you take the lines out, skill position, I feel like Cam Camper is your best bet, but that's also the one spot where Ohio State really, not exactly dying for guys.
Maryland's defensive numbers look really good, and yet I'm like, man, this is some of the worst offenses I've seen. Also, I'm a little bit concerned, because I kind of want to bet under in this game, but I'm not going to because of this.
Yeah.
Like Virginia's receivers made plays against these DBs. Both of Maryland's corners are like starting in the NFL right now from last year. I know Virginia can't really throw the ball, but like they did make plays one-on-one against these Maryland corners. I don't know. I don't know.
Will be very interesting. Hey, listen. Thank you, Bud. Thank you, Tom, for hanging out because we're doing it for the people. We're doing it for those of us who are subscribed to the Cover 3 podcast on YouTube. You smash the subscribe, you smash the like, you hit those notifications so that you know. I mean, this time it was a little overtime, right? This is something that the audio listeners didn't get. Next time, it might be a full-blown live mailbag. You won't even know unless you are subscribed. Big time audience kept rocking with us. We appreciate all of you for doing that. And you can follow him on Twitter at BudElliott3. You can follow him at Tom Fornelli. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.